The church was full. The music had started. The bride, radiant in her gown, waited at the end of the aisle in her wheelchair, but as everyone stood to welcome the groom, he never came. What happened next would change her life, and the lives of millions forever. The old stone church was glowing that afternoon, bathed in golden sunlight that filtered through the stained glass windows. White roses lined the aisle, their fragrance mingling with the quiet buzz of excitement. Guests filled the pews in elegant attire, whispering with anticipation. Soft classical music played from the quartet near the altar. It was a day, everything Emma had imagined since she was a little girl. At the back of the church, Emma sat quietly in her wheelchair, her ivory gown flowing gracefully around her. Her hair was pinned up with delicate pearls, and a sheer veil framed her glowing face. She held a bouquet of white lilies in her lap, hands slightly trembling but eyes filled with hope. Her heart beat faster with each passing second. Today wasn't just her wedding date, it was her victory over everything she had survived. The accident, the long nights of rehab, the stairs, the pity, none of it mattered today. She was loved, she was chosen, and she was ready. Ryan had promised her that the wheelchair didn't define her. He'd knelt beside her on a rainy Tuesday and slipped a ring onto her finger, whispering, "I want every day with you, just as you are." She had trusted that promise with everything she had. The music swelled, signaling the groom's entrance. Everyone turned toward the door, rising in unison, smiles growing, cameras lifting, but no one appeared. The music continued. Seconds ticked by. Whispers began. Emma looked down the aisle, her breath catching, waiting for his familiar stride, his reassuring smile. Still nothing. Her sister bent down, gently resting a hand on her shoulder, face pale. "Emma, he's not here." Emma blinked. "What do you mean? He's gone, he left." The words hit harder than the crash that had taken her legs. Her fingers clutched the bouquet tighter. She glanced around at the guests. Some looked away, some looked at her with pity. The silence in the room was suffocating. He hadn't just left. He'd left her here, in front of everyone, in the moment she needed him most. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she whispered to herself, "It's not me, it can't be me." But deep down, she feared that maybe, just maybe, it was. Here are the expanded scenes, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the story. She was rejected at the altar for being disabled, each written in a heartfelt narrative tone with approximately 400 words each. Emma didn't cry as she was wheeled out of the church, not when the priest bowed his head in sorrow, not when the guests awkwardly looked away, and not even when her mother silently wiped her own tears. The dress she had once twirled in front of the mirror now felt like a costume, a cruel joke played on someone who still believed in fairy tales. They took her home, and the house was too quiet. The wedding cake sat untouched in the kitchen. Dozens of white candles she'd picked out herself still flickered on the mantel, each one mocking her, with the promise of a future that now didn't exist. She changed out of the gown in silence. The pearls in her hair were carefully removed by her sister, but Emma couldn't meet her eyes. That night, lying awake in her bed, the events kept replaying in her mind. Ryan's face, his last text the night before, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, beautiful." His voice saying, "I don't care about the chair," but he had cared. When he thought about forever, he must have imagined something different. Someone different, someone easier. A deep ache settled in her chest, not just from heartbreak, but from something more painful. The belief that maybe her body had made her unlovable. Maybe no one would ever choose her fully. Maybe this was it. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends, relatives, and people trying to comfort her. But nothing made sense anymore. Not the sympathy, not the silence. She turned it off and stared at the ceiling for hours. In the middle of the night, Emma wheeled herself into the living room. She lit one of the wedding candles, stared at the flame, and whispered to no one, "Why wasn't I enough?" And though no one answered, the silence felt like truth. It was 3 days after the wedding. That wasn't when Emma found herself sitting alone in the park. It was the same spot she and Ryan had visited on their first date, a wooden bench near the pond, where ducks lazily drifted and children laughed in the background. She sat in her chair near the edge of the water, watching ripples move across the surface like time refusing to stand still. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days, not even her sister, who gently knocked on her door and left meals she didn't touch. Emma didn't want comfort, she wanted answers, closure, something that would help her breathe again. That's when an older man approached. He moved with a slight limp, using a cane, but his face was kind, eyes warm with a quiet understanding. He sat on the nearby bench without saying a word at first, sipping from a paper cup of coffee. Then he glanced at her and said gently, "Rough week." Emma offered a hollow laugh, surprised she even could. You could say that. He handed her a coffee he had brought with him, extra sugar, just like she liked it. She frowned. Do I know you? No, he said. But I know that, look, I wore it once, 40 years ago. Curious despite herself, she asked, what happened? He smiled softly. I got left at the altar too, motorcycle accident a year before. She said she couldn't picture pushing me around for the rest of her life, told me she needed a normal future. Emma's eyes widened, her voice was barely a whisper. And how did you survive it? He looked out at the water. Took a while. But then I realized it wasn't my body that was the problem. It was her sight. She couldn't see me beyond what changed. Emma stared at him, the truth landing like a quiet thunder inside her chest. She couldn't see what stayed the same. He continued. My heart, my humor, my love. He turned to her. You were never broken, Emma. Some people just aren't whole enough to love what's real. Tears slid down her cheeks, and for the first time since the church, she let them fall. Conversation with the old man stayed with her like a seed planted in soil. You're quiet, invisible at first, but slowly stirring beneath the surface. A week later, she sat down with a microphone she had never used and recorded her voice for the world to hear. She titled the podcast Worthy Anyway. Her first episode was raw, unpolished, and from the heart. She shared her story not to seek pity, but to offer honesty. I was left at the altar because I use a wheelchair, she said calmly. But I am not less than neither are you. To her surprise, people listened. The next week, a girl from Michigan sent her a message. I lost my leg in an accident. My boyfriend left me too. I thought I was alone until I heard you. Then came a teenager from New York with a stutter, a young man with severe burns from a fire, a war veteran battling PTSD. Week by week, they told their stories on her show, and Emma listened. She cried with them, she encouraged them, and they encouraged each other. Her following grew, so did her strength. The very thing that once made her feel like she wasn't worthy of love now gave her a purpose. Her voice became a bridge for others to find theirs. She never planned to become a symbol. She only wanted to tell the truth. But in telling it, she changed people. One caller said, you helped me ask someone out after 3 years of hiding. Another, I finally wore a dress in public, and I felt beautiful. What began in heartbreak turned into something far greater than any wedding. Emma wasn't just healing, she was helping others do the same. Every episode ended the same way. No matter what they said, no matter who walked away, you are still worthy. You always were, and people began to believe it. Years later, the stage was bigger, but Emma's voice was the same. She rolled onto the stage at a global human rights conference, greeted by thunderous applause. She wore a sleek black dress, her wheelchair with bold red and gold accents. Behind her, a screen displayed the words, Woman of the Year. She looked out over the crowd, thousands of faces, many holding up signs that read Worthy Anyway. She smiled, not because of the award, but because of what it represented. Proof that pain could bloom into power. That rejection didn't define the ending, it began a new story. As she scanned the audience, her eyes paused. Ryan, he stood near the back, older now, looking both proud and heartbroken. Their eyes met. She nodded, just once. There was no anger, no bitterness, only understanding. Later, as she accepted the award, she said, I was left at the altar, and I thought I was unlovable. But if he hadn't walked away, I wouldn't have found myself. Or all of you. The room went silent, emotion thick in the air. I've learned that love isn't about being perfect, it's about being seen. Truly seen. As she rolled off stage, people stood. Not just for her, but for every person who had ever felt forgotten, dismissed, or left behind. And in that moment, Emma knew she was never less. She was simply more than they ever expected.